This is WVBN from the United States. This week, President Roosevelt delivered an impassioned speech about the situation of the Morgana War. He described the days of infamy that have been experienced by nations around the world, including the United States, where relentless terror attacks have devastated large swaths of the coasts. He described the unusual circumstances of their foes, as the Morgana have no governing political body that might be attacked or negotiated with. After this, he revealed a startling revelation to the American public, that the Morgana had in fact taken up residence in a conventional state, starting with Central and South America. Brazil, Peru, and possibly others had sheltered and given up much of their sovereignty to the Morgana, and Roosevelt called for the United States to quash the Morganas before more nations could fall to their influence. He finished his speech by asking Congress to formally declare war on the Morganas, a request that was granted within 6 hours. The Central and South American loyalists who had escaped to the United States were glad for Roosevelt's support, but knew that their nations would be besieged from the inside and out. Chilean President Pedro Cerda pledged his nation's support in rooting out the Morgana from South America. This speech led to yet another wave of volunteers. One particular group, a number of young black men, formerly stationed aboard the USS Detroit, proudly signed on to the INPF fleet, where they encouraged other black Americans to join them, where they could be treated as equals. When police offered to break up the recruiters, depot commanders declined, as their enemies would not discriminate and they needed all the help they could get. The Army and Navy began a plan, an invasion to liberate Panama from the Morganas. Given the danger in the Caribbean, a smaller Marine detachment would be sent on the Atlantic side, while the larger Army detachment would be sent via the Pacific. Both sides would clear the way through the country in order to liberate the government and reclaim the Panama Canal. After an unknown party had requested that the scientist dock be turned over in a makeshift raft provided to the U.S., a plan was hatched to turn the tables. USS Seawolf was chosen to deliver a jerry-rigged bomb disguised as a human occupant to the requested location. As they remained a distance away, they watched as the raft went farther and farther out to sea, until a paranoia appeared to claim the prize. The captain watched her jump with glee, and as she went to claim the craft, the captain prepared for a magnificent explosion, and the packed explosives blew a mighty hole in the side of the vessel, as shrapnel and fire ripped through her. As Seawolf slinked away into the night, the rest of the Navy prepared to evacuate several sunken target ships from the coast, in preparation for the Morgana's inevitable counterattack. A report was also delivered to Norfolk. General MacArthur joined Philippine President Quezon to reassure the islands that the majority of the Philippines' armed forces would remain to defend their country from attack. This was followed up by an announcement that in addition to the U.S. Army and Marine forces, a scouting force of 2,000 Filipinos was being sought to join them, who would receive the same kit and pay as their counterparts and be allowed to return home with their gear. An overwhelming number of volunteers soon filled these ranks, and these scouts would soon join the rest of the force. The Northern Pacific Battle Fleet and Asiatic Fleet reorganized into the First Fleet at Manila, and set out to rendezvous with the Japanese and British near Palau. 2 days out to sea, they received intelligence from nearby U.S. submarines that a large Morgana force was slowly sailing towards the Philippines. A flight of U.S. aircraft minced much of the Morganas, and despite having the opportunity to disengage, Admiral Reed would not leave the Philippines to its fate. He attacked the Morganas head-on, and a brutal skirmish soon began. Aboard the lead ship USS West Virginia, Captain Markland prepared for another round of incoming fire, as the guns lined up more shots, when the bridge was suddenly filled with dust. He realized it was the smell of coal, and turned to fight an incredibly tall woman dressed as a miner and covered in coal dust, with helmet, light, and pickaxe in hand. Her pet yellow canary followed the turrets, as she gleefully proclaimed "My turn," and blasted a large number of Morgana to pieces on the spot. USS Idaho radioed her congratulations to West Virginia, and the Morgana fleet was easily cut to pieces. As the fleet victoriously made it to Palau, Ginny and her fellow Belles began to chat with one another, and eagerly awaited to meet their Japanese and British counterparts. The Navy pursued the development of large-caliber anti-aircraft firearms, with the full development found on the Victory Belle's Discord, as well as a full transcript of the war report. The North Atlantic convoy, Task Force 22, was deprived of shore leave when a sudden change in orders required them to escort a number of foreign ships to Norfolk. The irritable sailors worked poorly with their British and Italian counterparts, though Captain Simmons Taylor of HMS Centurion offered to handle the international coordination to spare the Americans. Newly awakened Rex offered some gift baskets, though not before officers locked up the included wines. The convoy was beset by Morgana attack along the way, and though Houston and Centurion valiantly fought them off, it was not before 2 merchant ships were sunk and 2 destroyers had their engines damaged. Eventually, the convoy reached New York after a miserable week at sea. CBS correspondent Eric Sevareid hurriedly inquired with his BBC counterparts about the translated speech from Adolf Hitler, but was shocked to discover that it was a mere act by a talented British actor. The BBC staff were amused that their joke was not obvious to the Americans, and CBS opted to simply broadcast an account of the prank for the nightly news. The Pacific Convoy Force, Task Force 11, set out to locate the missing French ships near the Arafura Sea. Despite a thorough search and aerial recon, the ships were unable to locate the missing vessels and were forced to return after searching as long as they could. Aerial elements in the Caribbean Sea had success hunting Morgana submarines as various air wings attacked and destroyed a number of submarines prowling around the waters. Louisville, Kentucky had been host to their namesake cruiser for nearly 2 months, though she was started in very rough shape. It was now time for her to begin a slow journey down the Mississippi and back to the ocean, and the people of Louisville were sad to see her go. Ingalls Shipbuilding was contracted by the French government to construct 2 aircraft carriers for $80 million, backed up by French gold to be delivered to the United States. Half had been paid in cash up front for the purchase of materials. Though they had never constructed an aircraft carrier, they began to draw plans inspired by the Lexington class, and estimated that keels could be laid in October. In Narvik, Captain Silver organized the Japanese and Italian soldiers in fortifying the town against hostile threats. Work continued with great cooperation between them, and for the brief time when the Soviet troops joined, before being hastily recalled by their commissars. It was an improvement and led to higher morale for the troops. This has been WVBN from the United States.